Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be doing a tier list for the Manchester major teams. And before we get into it properly, let me say I don't know what the reason was. I don't know if I just got blessed by the YouTube algorithm, but my previous video going over phase number 1 of the Manchester Major is currently, I think, the second most viewed video on my channel. And if it keeps going, it's, I think, just a few hundred views away from being my most viewed. So I guess, I don't know, maybe that's the magic of a just over 10-minute video, and it just hit the sweet spot. Hopefully it can continue. And if you're a new subscriber, which there are, I don't know, 100 or 200 new subscribers relatively recently, then I guess welcome. And I intend to continue doing some coverage for the Manchester Major, and then maybe continuing on from there. We'll see. I guess there is a lengthy offseason in Siege. And one more thing, I wanted to recommend a video to you guys. Definitely check out, I'll have it linked in the description, a YouTube channel called Purple did an interview with Super, and Rexon's in there a little bit too. I really enjoyed the content and the style of the video. So if you're watching my channel, you'll probably be interested. Give it at least a few minutes, see if it hooks you or not. And then, you know, if it doesn't, no harm, no foul. But I thought it was a good video. Check it out. It'll be I think the first thing in the description. Okay, so let's start ranking the teams, and you can see the tiers I've established here. I did it a little bit differently. By default, this tier list has it's like winner, grand finalist, top 4, top 8, that sort of thing. I think that's a little bit silly to do. I guess you can sort of do it that way in terms of that's, more or less where you expect teams to make it to, but doing predictions for that deep into the tournament is a little bit silly, because all we know as of now are the matchups for phase number 1. And so in case it's not clear, the favorites, the teams that I and probably most people expect to win the tournament, one of them to win the tournament. Then we have threats. These are teams that I think will likely make probably playoffs, if not top 4, top 2, and I could even see them winning the entire thing over the favorites. I'd be a little bit surprised, but not shocked. And then decent, these are the teams, maybe they make top 8, but probably more likely I would see them going, 2 and 3 or something like that in Swiss, getting close but not quite there. If they made a deep run, I would be a little bit surprised, and probably quite surprised to see them win the entire thing. And then we have questionable teams. These aren't the bottom of the barrel, but I would be very surprised to see these teams making it into top 8 and maybe even the last round of Swiss. So if they're in phase 1, maybe they make it out of phase 1 and they get like 1 or 2 wins maybe in Swiss, but I don't really expect much more than that. And then they exist. I mean, it's teams that are at the major, but I don't expect them to advance whatsoever. So if they're only in phase 1, I don't think they're making it out of there. If they're in phase 2, I don't think they're making it out of there, because there are maybe some weaker teams in phase 2 than in phase 1. That's just the nature of the regions and the qualification system and all that. Okay, so with all of that lengthy setup out of the way, we have 20 teams to talk about. I didn't put these in order, so we're just going to take it in the order that they are, starting with Space Station Gaming. They're a pretty volatile team, and that's probably true of a good number of teams, and just Siege in general. It really comes down to who's better on the day. It's not always, it is in a way a game of consistency, but especially now with how few events we have, it really is just who's hot over the course of maybe not one day, but over the course of a pretty short period of time. SSG, a lot of people are predicting them to maybe even get upset in stage 1, or phase 1, stage 1. I'll probably say those interchangeably. But if they do make it into phase 2, I think a lot of people think they won't be making playoffs. They had a decent year last year. I think they made top 11 at the first major, top 8 at the second major, and then top 8 at SI, which is pretty respectable. Of course, not making it past that. They had, I think they lost to W7M in their last matchup at SI, so if they had a different matchup, maybe they make it even farther, but I think they're fine here. I don't know. I think they're sort of on the line. They could maybe go up to threats, but they didn't look super impressive this stage. They looked a little bit better in the LCQ, but I don't know if that's enough to quite bump them up into threats. And then we have BDS. Yeah, I mean, maybe the number 1 favorite for this event. Let me know what you guys think, because there's probably going to be 3 teams up here in favorites. You probably know who they are. Do you think BDS is number 1? They have more to prove than the other ones, because they're a newly formed team, and not entirely so. The skeleton of BDS is still there with Shaiko and Bride and Leakafact bringing on Uzus and Solotov, and not to mention the support staff, I think, remaining the same. I'm not super up to snuff on that. Anyways, 2 new players come in, really impressive. Uzus looked insane this stage. Solotov, not so much, but I mean, not everybody had to shine. They've only lost like 2 maps in the last however long, and only 1 series, because one of the maps they dropped was in a best of 3, not a best of 1. So that 1 loss to ENCE is the only series loss they've had in quite a while. So they look really scary, but now is the time for them to really prove themselves as not just a team who can tussle, who can sort of dominate Europe, but a team that can dominate the world like they should. I mean, on paper, incredible team. Okay, then we have G2, and this might not be my final placement. Let's talk about it really briefly. I think pretty clearly they're going to be in one of these two tiers. G2, because of what they've done in the past, and not just winning SI 2023, and I guess that was 15 months ago, that's been a little while, but so many times we've seen them look not so good in Europe, and then maybe they just sort of scrape by and they qualify, or they just don't live up to expectations regionally in some form or another, but they like always make top 8, right? It's been, I guess, a little while since they missed an event, and even before they missed that one, the events before that, they were making top 8. So maybe every once in a while they miss an event, but pretty rarely, if they do make an event, do they not make at least a decent run. And for that reason, yeah, they had a pretty shaky stage. They had to make it through LCQ, but I still think I think they're going up in threat. I think that's pretty hard to dispute. I guess maybe they'll just look terrible. Maybe I'm going to be eating my words, but based on things we've seen in the past, it seems pretty likely that they'll at least make a good run. I wouldn't be losing my mind if they even won the entire thing. I could see it. Okay, then we have M80, and this is a fun one to talk about because this is a team, they had so many expectations. They lived up to, I guess, not none of them, because they were pretty good within North America, but they fell to absolute pieces every time they played internationally, except for the very first M80 when they were still the same XSET team. But once they brought on Iconic and Spoit, they were just so bad. They had a major where they went like 0-3, and one they went 1-3, and then SI. I'll give them a little bit of grace there because they had, I think, easily the strongest group. If you swap them with any of the other teams that were of the same seed as theirs, I think they probably at least made it out, and then who knows what would have happened in bracket, but at least made it out of their group. And do I think it's probably one of these two positions? I think I'll just put him in decent because the way things work out, questionable, and they exist. There are just teams from other regions that I think will at least pretty clearly be under M80. Not necessarily all the spoiler APAC teams, but a lot of them. So I think I'll put him in decent. My thinking is that they'll be at least a little bit better than the previous roster because the bar is so low, but we'll see how they work out. Once again, they top 2 placement within North America, but will they fall to pieces at an international event? We'll have to see. Okay, and then we have Liquid, and this is a really hard one. So clearly they're not a favorite. Threat, I think that's even questionable. I think I'm probably putting them in decent. I could see them if I were to reevaluate after phase number 1, if they play really well, and also depending on who they play. I guess they do play G2 for sure. If they look really good against G2 and then also really good against the next team, assuming they win against G2, if they go 2-0, they look good in both of them, I'd maybe even bump them up to threat. But for now, I don't know if I quite want to have them down in questionable. Like they were so laughably bad for the first, I think, 4 games of Brazil, but then they really bossed up, and they were pretty close to making playoffs, but then in LCQ, they just clearly look like the best team, I think. That was playing in LCQ at least. And so I think I'll have them in decent. We'll see. Maybe I have to I might even add another tier because decent might get a little bit clogged up. We'll see. Because Beast Coast, I think, also going there. And we'll reevaluate this as well. And maybe I'll order these later on, but for now, we're not going to order them. So Beast Coast, yeah, first seed out of North America, sort of came out of nowhere. I think a lot of people had them, I did, as my dark horse, but I didn't think they'd be winning North America. Maybe the 3rd seed, maybe the 4th seed from the LCQ, but I didn't really think they were going to do this well, and especially after the first 3 weeks when they were winless, last place in the team, all of that, and they look really good. I feel like they'll be figured out a little bit. Maybe part of their success was a little bit of the surprise factor. Other teams now will be like, oh, this team came out of nowhere and they're number 1 in North America. Let's take a deep dive into them and figure them out. But maybe teams will still be underestimating them. Maybe Europe and Brazil think North America is a Mickey Mouse region at the moment. I'll have them here in decent, but again, we'll maybe take a second look at decent in a little bit. And Bleed, so this is another tricky one. Clearly they're better than just they exist. Questionable, they're probably even better than that. They looked pretty decent this last year internationally, culminating in SI, where they didn't go as deep as they could have probably. They look pretty reasonable, and they didn't fall apart against SSG, but they probably should have at least gone to that 3rd map. They probably should have won map number 2, which I think was Chalet. As far as APAC teams go, and by APAC I basically just mean teams that are not from North. Okay, well no, there's also like LATAM, but you know, Asia Pacific, that's a pretty massive area. So they're probably the best APAC team besides maybe Bliss, but I think at the moment I'd probably say Bleed. Although Bliss did place more highly at SI, so there is that by 1 or 2 rounds. I think maybe these guys got what, top 8, and these guys got top 12, so I think it was just 1 match difference. I think I'd probably put more stock into Bleed. Bliss is already into phase number 2, but that's just a matter of the structure of the league, so I'll have these guys here for now. And then we have Cyclops. So I think they just exist, right? I did predict them to make it out of phase number 2, but because they have to play against some other they exist level teams, the previous iterations of this roster, and it's not like this team's completely different. They have at least a few of the players, if not a majority of the players from the previous Cyclops that was at a lot of majors in a row and never made it out of groups. I just don't have a lot of faith in them. Like, maybe they'll be better than they were before, but similar to M80, the bar is pretty low. So I think they're just existing at this major to be fodder for some other teams, or maybe a few teams will somehow even be fodder for them. We'll have to see. I predicted them over FearX, and I think a lot of people are saying that will go the other way if it does happen, but we'll get to that in a moment. Then we have DarkZero. I think I'll put them up in threat. I think most people agree with this sentiment that they are probably the team you can hope for the most from North America. They weren't the first seed, they weren't the second seed, but they were, I think, the best performing NA team at SI, tied with Sonics. I still think DarkZero's run was more impressive. They almost made top 3, but they choked it against Empire, right? And Sonics aren't even here, so what's it really matter? They certainly outperformed SSG and M80, and Beast Coast weren't even there. So DarkZero, yeah, they have the caliber of players. I still think the Bolo pickup hasn't looked impressive, but I think this is his time to shine. If he doesn't work out here, I don't know if anything will convince me except for a really good run. I think I'll have maybe lost faith in the pickup. But if he has a good major and the team has a good major, I guess maybe that'll convince me. But yeah, just Canadian and his teams, they pretty much always have not always. I guess they had 1 bad major last year, but they also had a pretty good major and they had a pretty good SI. So I think I would expect them at least to make top 8, maybe top 11, top 8, maybe top 4. And I could potentially see them winning. They'll need to figure out a few things from last stage, and it did seem like they had figured out a lot of it going into like the second half or so of the stage, because they were pretty bad at the beginning and then they improved. So and I guess that's actually the case for a lot of teams, DarkZero and Liquid and Beast Coast, etc. So yeah, I consider them a threat. Then we have E1, and they were actually the second seed out of Brazil. They only lost to FaZe in the playoffs, although they were like 4 and 5 coming into the playoffs. So that goes to show you don't have to do that well in the round robin portion. You just need to show up in the playoffs, again, assuming you've qualified for it. And I don't know, I guess I didn't watch a ton of them. I'm going to put them in questionable because I certainly have some questions. Maybe that's underrating them. Maybe they belong in decent. Second seed out of Brazil. I just feel like it was kind of a fluke. I don't know. Let me know if I'm full of it, and I guess maybe you won't even have to let me know if they perform well. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we'll recalculate. Bleed over E1 based on factors seems silly, but okay. Let's move on, and maybe we'll revisit it. Then we have FaZe. Yeah, obviously going to be the favorites. They haven't. When's the last time they lost a series? They didn't lose a single best of 1. I think they only went to overtime twice. And then they didn't drop a map in playoffs, right? They went 2-0, 2-0. So BDS only dropped 2 maps and 1 series. FaZe dropped nothing. They look indomitable. They are so hungry to win after their colossal loss at 6 Invitational, where they got reversed. They were down they were up 6-1, and then they lost 7 rounds in a row to lose it out to then W7M, now Furia. So yeah, if there is a favorite, it's probably, I don't know. I'm going to skip FearX for a second since we're already having this conversation. Obviously, these are the 3 favorites. Nobody's saying anyone else is a favorite besides them. W7M, now Furia, same roster, new org. Won everything last year. They won Copenhagen, they won Atlanta, they won 6 Invitational. Can they keep repeating? They got to lose eventually, but will it be here? I don't know. They don't look as good as they did before. I don't know if they look quite as good as BDS and FaZe, but just based on their accolades with this exact roster, you just obviously can't count them out until they show that they've most definitely fallen off. You know, maybe they had a few struggles within their region, but until I see them get blown away internationally, like, they're going to be a favorite, right? Okay, now onto the Fox. Fear X, yeah, they exist. They are just another team. Japan and South Korea are just probably the two weakest regions in Siege. Maybe along with Middle East. Well, no, okay, probably LATAM is the weakest region, but they're all kind of muddled together. None of them have ever really done anything impressive, and somebody's got to fill out that they exist, and that's going to be that. Then we have GK also going to be down there, and yeah, we saw Falcons have a showing here or there last year. We saw GK, which isn't really the same roster, sort of a new roster, but we saw GK have a good run in Atlanta. So we've seen a few flashes from the region, but still not enough to be convinced that they'll make anything happen. Whether you think Atlanta was just a miracle run or not, it's just not the same team. So we'll have to see what they do. Maybe they make it out of phase 1, but I predicted them to go 0-2. So I kind of doubt it. They exist. Then we have ITB, Into the Breach, and this is an interesting one. I think I'm even going to put them in threats, and let me know if you agree with this or not. They sort of came out of nowhere, and it seems like a pretty strong parallel, I guess, with Beast Coast. In a little bit different of a storyline. Beast Coast was sort of all thrown together, but it's a lot of experienced players and Diffuser, whereas Into the Breach, it's mostly inexperienced players. Kendrew's played a ton, but the other players have played anywhere from 0 stages before this one to just a handful, you know, like 2 or 3. So really young roster, really new players overall, and they showed up. And I doubted them. I think I had them like last place in my round robin predictions, and they showed me up there, made it all the way to second place. They took a map off of BDS, one of only 2 teams to do so throughout the entire stage. And yeah, they just look really good. And also, they are going to be almost certainly the hometown favorite. There's a British player on BDS, and then there's a few on, or no, is it only Doki? Am I forgetting? Anyway, I don't know. There's some number on G2, and I guess like their coach, whatever. And then just like regionally, people might, and Secret, are any of their players English? I want to say maybe, I don't know, whatever. ITB is majority British, English, whatever you want to say, players. And so hometown favorites, they're going to be in Manchester. They don't have to travel far. They're going to have the crowds at their back, and they look pretty impressive. They look like they just are fundamentally pretty put together. And if they had any issues, probably they've figured them out by now. Europe was the last team to send any of their teams to qualify any of their teams in G2, but that was just the LCQ. The actual teams, including ITB, had already qualified a little while ago, so they had even more time to get ready. I'm going to put them in threats for, again, the aforementioned reasons. And then we have Talon. So is this just like, is this a Hopium thing? I don't know. I didn't watch them at all, but the whole Fabian and Pengu angle it's certainly fun, if nothing else, and clearly something worked. Like Fabian joined the team, and so did Pengu, but I imagine it's mostly Fabian being the actual coach and whatnot. And they just went from, I don't even know, were they even a relevant team in Korea before? And now they were the best team, right? They're the top seed. I don't think they absolutely dominated. They were shaky a little bit here or there, but yeah, they were just the best team from nowhere. So I'll put them at least in questionable. I think a lot of people would love to see them make a good run, but I don't know. We'll see if it actually happens or not. Then we have Scars, and maybe I'll put them in questionable, I guess. I think they showed up sometimes and they've fallen apart sometimes. They had a really bad SI, but they had one, I want to say Copenhagen, right? They beat SSG in the final round of Swiss to qualify for top 8. So they had a top 8 appearance, and so they had a pretty reasonable major, but again, also a bad SI, and that was the more recent one. I'll put them in questionable. I want to say they're probably better than the teams down here, and they exist, but I don't know. I could see them falling down. I, again, didn't watch a whole lot of the minor regions, so we'll have to see what happens there. We have Bliss, and I don't know if I want them I think both Bliss and E1, I don't know, do you think I'm insane for not putting them in decent? I'm going to have them here for a moment. Again, maybe we'll recalibrate. They had a good SI. They made top 8, and that's a feat not a lot of teams can say, and especially not a lot of APAC teams can say. Did they have a few easy matchups? Maybe, but I think pretty clearly they look like one of the only Threatening teams, again, not anywhere near the actual threats, but these are just the top teams of the top teams. What are you going to do? If maybe you're a top 20 team in the world, but that's not quite the same as being a top 5, top 10 team. So I'm going to put them there for now. And then Cruelty, yeah, they exist. I don't think they're doing anything, but they're probably the team I know the least about. So potentially they make a few upsets. Maybe they make it into phase 2. I'd be shocked if they did anything beyond that, if they got more than like 1 win somehow in Swiss. And then we have Secret, and I'm gonna put them in decent. They looked like, I guess, the second best team in Europe throughout round robin, but then ITB took their spot as the actual second seed after playoffs, and I think they're fine there. So again, do I want to move any teams up or down? And it's really, I think they exist. I'm happy with this. Favorites, I'm happy with this. Are any teams going up or down? I really would like to have one more team in threats, but who let me hang on. Let's reorder just a little bit. M80, I don't know. Like SSG's probably should be pretty low here. Maybe like this, or I don't know. Like, and actually, all 3 of these teams are in phase 1 right now. That's probably fine. I'm not gonna fiddle over too much. I think I'm just going to settle on this. Do I want to reorder any of this? I don't know. Maybe Bleed goes down. Maybe Bliss goes up. I think these 2 are like locked in here. I'll do that for the heck of it. I mean, they've been on quite the run, and we haven't seen them fall just yet. We haven't seen them stumble since they started being good. So I think I'm gonna go with this, I guess. I also think potentially if M80 looks good in the first few games, like they could move. I think a lot of teams could move up or down after we see them play internationally just a little bit. But for now, I think this is what I'm going to rock with. So let's do that. Yeah, I'm just trying to roughly order them now. That's probably fine. Yeah. Oh, okay. Do I need to order this anymore? No, I think that's the order I'm going to go with. And I could definitely see if some teams move up a few positions, move down a few positions, but this is probably about what... it's probably about what I'm thinking. Okay, so yeah, let me know your thoughts. This ended up being a little bit longer than I expected, but there are 20 teams, so you can expect me to talk about each team on average for at least a little over a minute, so it is what it is. Let me know your thoughts down below. Once again, I implore you to leave a like and to check out that video I put down in the description, and I will catch you guys next time.